Lena Carter stood in front of her bedroom mirror, the faint morning light touching the edges of her face. The clock showed 8:10 a.m., and the quiet hum of the washing machine was the only sound in the house. Her husband, Mark, had already left for his job at the auto shop, and the house felt unusually still. She liked mornings like this, peaceful, predictable, calm. But deep inside, that same quiet also reminded her of something missing. It had been 7 years since she married Mark. In the beginning, life had been full of laughter, long drives, and shared dreams. But over time, the warmth had faded. Mark had grown distant, often tired and distracted. Their conversations had turned practical about bills, groceries, or errands. Nothing more. Lena loved him, but she often felt invisible. It's like someone walking beside him rather than with him. That morning, she tried to distract herself with chores. She folded clean laundry, sorted towels, and brewed coffee. She told herself everything was fine, just another quiet day in their small town of Maple Creek. But that peace was broken in a way she could never have expected. Mark's son from his first marriage, Ryan, was coming home for a weekend visit. He was 22, a senior studying architecture in Chicago, and Lena hadn't seen him for almost a year. When she married Mark, Ryan had been a quiet teenager, polite but cautious, unsure how to accept a new woman in his father's life. Over the years, their relationship had softened. He started calling her by her name instead of Dad's wife, and sometimes he'd ask her for advice. She liked him. He had a kind, respectful nature, a bit shy but genuine. She wanted his visit to feel warm, welcoming, and perfect. She baked his favorite muffins the night before, cleaned the guest room, and placed a small vase of wildflowers by the window. She hoped he'd notice. That morning, Lena was in her bedroom, changing out of her house robe after spilling coffee on it. She pulled off the blouse she'd been wearing and reached for another one. The curtains were drawn and she thought she was alone. The house had that stillness she'd grown used to. But just as she slipped out of her blouse, she heard the sound of the front door. "Dad, you home?" The voice came from downstairs, familiar, but she hadn't heard it in months. Her heart jumped. It was Ryan. Her mind froze for a second. He wasn't supposed to arrive until the evening. Before she could say anything, the sound of footsteps came closer, fast, heavy, moving straight toward the bedroom. "Ryan, wait." She called, but it was too late. The door opened. And Ryan stood there, suitcase in hand, his expression stunned. For a split second, time stopped. He looked as surprised as she felt. Lena gasped, grabbed her blouse, and quickly pulled it across her chest. "Oh my God, Ryan!" she blurted out, her face burning with embarrassment. I'm sorry," he stammered, stepping back so fast he almost dropped his bag. "I didn't know you were, I thought." Lena couldn't help but laugh nervously, partly out of shock. "It's okay, really. I just wasn't expecting you this early. Took an earlier bus," he said, still flustered, his ears turning red. "I wanted to surprise Dad. Guess I surprised the wrong person?" Her laughter softened the awkwardness. "You definitely did," she said, quickly buttoning her blouse. "But it's fine, Ryan. Don't worry." He nodded, still looking mortified. I'll just take my stuff to the guest room." When he left, Lena sat on the edge of her bed for a moment, catching her breath. Her heart was still racing, not from shame, but from the sudden shock of being seen. Not in a scandalous way, but as a person again, visible, real, later. She found him in the kitchen, unpacking some things he had brought from the city. "Truce?" he asked, holding up a bag of her favorite cookies. Lena smiled, amused by his attempt to make things less awkward. "You didn't have to do that." "Consider it my apology," he said, grinning a little. They both laughed, and the tension between them melted away. They sat down for breakfast, scrambled eggs, toast, and coffee. The conversation started small but soon flowed naturally. Ryan told her about his classes, his dream of designing sustainable buildings, and how he'd started cooking on weekends to save money. She listened, genuinely interested, noticing how much he'd changed. He wasn't the unsure teenager she remembered. He had confidence now, a calmness in how he spoke. "You sound like someone who's grown up," she said with a smile. "I had to," he replied. College kind of forces that on you. Lena nodded thoughtfully. I guess it does. For a while, they sat in comfortable silence. The sunlight spilled through the kitchen window, lighting the dust in the air like glitter. Lena realized how rare it was for her to have such easy company. Mark was usually quiet, tired from work, and uninterested in long conversations. But Ryan asked questions, listened, and laughed easily. It reminded her what warmth felt like. As the morning turned into afternoon, they unpacked groceries together. He told stories from the city about late-night projects and funny professors. She told him about Maple Creek, the new neighbors, and how Mark had been working too much again. There was no tension, no discomfort, just familiarity. Like they'd known each other for years. When Mark finally returned home that evening, he was surprised to see Ryan already there. "You're early," he said, patting his son on the back. "Couldn't wait," Ryan replied with a grin. "Wanted to get Mom's cooking?" Lena smiled at the word Mom. He didn't mean it literally, but it still warmed her heart. Dinner was lively. Ryan talked, Mark laughed, and for a brief moment, everything felt whole again, like the family Lena had always wanted. But that night, when Lena went to bed, sleep didn't come easily. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the day. That small, awkward morning moment kept replaying in her mind. Not because of what it was a misunderstanding, but because of what it revealed. She had been seen by someone again, even for a second. And it reminded her how long she'd been living unseen. She wasn't angry or ashamed. She just felt aware of how empty her marriage had quietly become, aware of how little warmth her days carried, aware that sometimes life shakes you in small, strange ways just to remind you that you're still alive the next day. She'd wake up to a new kind of tension, not inappropriate, but emotional. Because Ryan wasn't just visiting to say hello. He had come home with something on his mind, something that had been weighing on him for months. And what he'd soon tell her about his father would turn her quiet world upside down. The morning after Ryan's unexpected arrival, Lena woke to the sound of laughter coming from the kitchen. For a moment, she felt warmth, the kind she hadn't felt in years. She got up, put on her robe, and walked downstairs. Ryan was sitting at the table eating toast while Mark stood by the counter scrolling through his phone. It was a normal family scene, but Lena noticed how quickly Mark's smile faded when he looked up at her. He nodded, said a quick morning, and went back to reading his messages. That small gesture stung more than she wanted to admit. Ryan noticed. "You okay, Lena?" he asked quietly after Mark left for work. She nodded, trying to sound cheerful. "Of course. Why wouldn't I be?" He didn't press, but his eyes said he knew better. The day moved slowly. Lena busied herself with house chores while Ryan offered to help her clean the backyard. They worked side by side under the cool spring sun, raking leaves and chatting about little things. Her garden, his college life, and the difference between city noise and small-town silence. But after a while, their laughter faded, and Ryan's expression changed. He set down the rake, hesitated, then said softly, "Can I ask you something? Personal." Lena looked at him, a bit surprised. "Of course. What's on your mind?" He seemed to search for words before speaking. "When was the last time you and Dad? I mean, when did you two last really talk? Like honestly, talk." The question caught her off guard. "I don't know," she said after a pause. "It's been a while, I guess. He's been busy. You know how he gets." Ryan sighed. "Yeah, that's what I thought." There was something heavy in his voice, something he wasn't saying. She frowned slightly. "Why do you ask?" He leaned against the fence, looking down. "Because, Lena, I don't think you know what's been going on with him." Her heart tightened. "What do you mean?" Ryan hesitated again, clearly torn. "I shouldn't even be the one telling you this, but I can't just keep quiet anymore." He took a deep breath. "I think Dad's been seeing someone else." The words hit her like a sudden wind. For a moment, she didn't understand. She just stared at him. Ryan continued, his voice low and careful. "I didn't want to believe it either, but I saw messages on his phone when he visited me in Chicago a few months ago. They weren't appropriate. They were from someone named Claire, and there were photos. Not bad ones, but still it was obvious. Lena's mind started spinning. Are you sure? Maybe it's a coworker or just a friend. No, Ryan said firmly. It wasn't like that. He was different with her. He even left our dinner early one night because she called. That's when I knew something was wrong. Lena stood still, her breath caught in her throat. The sound of birds and wind around them faded into silence. Ryan stepped closer, regret in his eyes. I didn't want to tell you like this. I just thought you deserved to know. She swallowed hard, forcing a small nod. Thank you for being honest, Ryan. For a few minutes, neither of them spoke. She tried to gather her thoughts, but emotions came in waves. Confusion, hurt, disbelief. It wasn't anger yet, just deep sadness. She had trusted Mark completely. He wasn't perfect, but she'd believed his distance came from exhaustion. Not betrayal. She sat on the porch steps, her hands trembling slightly. Ryan sat beside her. I'm so sorry, he said quietly. You've always been kind to me. You don't deserve this. She smiled faintly, though her eyes were wet. Life isn't always fair, Ryan. Sometimes we just love the wrong way. He looked at her, his expression soft and worried. You shouldn't blame yourself. They sat together in silence, watching the sunlight move across the grass. For Lena, the world suddenly felt heavier, yet strangely clearer. She saw the signs she'd ignored. Mark's late nights, his cold replies, his constant checking of messages when he thought she wasn't looking. She'd convinced herself it was just stress. But maybe her heart had known the truth all along. Later that evening when Mark returned home, Lena tried to act normal. She cooked dinner, smiled when he spoke, and asked about his day. But every word from his mouth felt like a shadow. He talked about work, the new clients, and how tired he was. The same routine conversations that had filled their years together. After dinner, Mark went upstairs to take a shower, and Ryan helped Lena clear the table. She noticed he was watching her, concerned. I'll be fine, she said softly. You don't have to worry about me. Kay shook his head. I do worry. You've been there for me more than my dad has sometimes. I don't like seeing you hurt. His words touched something deep inside her. She looked at him, realizing how much he'd grown, not just in age, but in empathy. There was a quiet strength in him, the kind she wished Mark still had, that night. After everyone had gone to bed, Lena lay awake again. The clock ticked, the wind whispered outside, and her mind refused to rest. She thought about confronting Mark, but the thought of hearing the truth scared her. She wasn't ready to break what was left of their life together, not yet. The next morning, Mark left early again, claiming he had to meet a client in the next town. Lena watched him drive away, the ache in her chest growing heavier. When she turned around, Ryan was standing by the doorway with a cup of coffee. Did you sleep? He asked gently. Not really, she admitted. He handed her the cup. Then you need this. She smiled faintly. Thank you. They sat in the kitchen again, just like the day before. But this time, there was a new kind of silence, deeper, more understanding. Finally, Ryan said, you know, when Mom left Dad, I was angry at her for a long time. I thought she just gave up on him. But now I see. He's the one who gives up on people. He stops trying when things get real. Lena looked down, tracing the rim of her cup. Maybe that's his way of escaping. Maybe, Ryan said quietly. But that doesn't make it right. There was a pause. Then he added, you deserve someone who sees you, who actually listens. Dad doesn't see how lucky he is. Those words stayed with her. Someone who sees you. She realized that was what she had been craving all along, to be noticed. Valued, loved, without condition. The rest of the day passed slowly. Ryan offered to drive her to the grocery store, and on the way back, they stopped by the lake. The air was crisp, and the water sparkled under the sun. They sat on a bench, neither talking much. But Lena felt something shift, a strange comfort. A closeness built on shared pain rather than romance. She saw Ryan glance at her once, his expression gentle, not pitying, but protective. It made her heart ache in a different way. Not romantic, but human. He reminded her of what kindness felt like. When they got home, Mark was already there, pretending to be cheerful. "You two had a busy day?" he asked casually. "Just errands," Lena replied. Mark nodded, distracted as always. His phone buzzed on the counter, and he quickly turned it face down. That small, nervous motion confirmed everything Ryan had said. Lena didn't need proof anymore. She saw it in his eyes, in his guilt. That night, she stood by the window looking out at the dark yard. Ryan came downstairs quietly and saw her there. "You okay?" he asked again, his voice low. She nodded. "Just thinking. About Dad." "Yes. And about what comes next." Ryan stepped closer. "Whatever you decide, I'll support you. You're family to me, Lena, always." His words made her chest tighten. For the first time in a long while, she felt seen, truly seen. When she went to bed that night, she didn't cry. She felt something else instead. Strength. The kind that comes when you finally stop pretending everything's fine. Tomorrow, she decided, she would ask Mark the truth. And whatever his answer was, her life would never be the same again. The next morning began quietly, almost too quietly. Lena woke up early, before sunrise, and stood by the kitchen window, holding a cup of coffee that had already gone cold. Her thoughts were loud, her heartbeat restless. Today she would finally confront Mark. She had rehearsed what she'd say in her mind a dozen times during the night. But every version felt wrong. Part of her wanted to shout, part of her wanted to cry, and another part, the tired part, just wanted peace. When she heard Mark's footsteps coming down the stairs, her pulse quickened. He appeared in the doorway, looking as if nothing was wrong. He smiled faintly, poured himself coffee, and kissed her on the cheek out of habit. That simple act felt almost cruel now. "Morning," he said. "You're up early." She looked at him, steady but calm. "We need to talk, Mark." He froze for a moment, then set his cup down slowly. "All right," he said, trying to sound casual. "About what?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she took a breath and said quietly, "About Claire." The name hit him like a stone. His eyes flickered, his shoulders stiffened. He didn't say anything for several seconds. Finally, he exhaled. "Who told you?" "It doesn't matter," Lena said softly. "I just want to know the truth." Mark rubbed the back of his neck, avoiding her gaze. "It's complicated." "And make it simple," she replied. "Were you seeing her?" He hesitated, then nodded slowly. "It wasn't serious," he said quickly, as if that would lessen the damage. "It just happened. I was stressed, lonely, things between us felt." "Don't," Lena interrupted gently, her voice trembling but firm. "Don't make excuses. Just tell me why." He looked at her finally, guilt written all over his face. "Because I felt invisible, Lena. You stopped talking to me. Everything became routine. Work, dinner, sleep. It's like we were living next to each other, not together." Lena felt the tears sting, but didn't let them fall. "And you think betrayal fixes that?" "I didn't plan it," Mark said quickly. "It just happened. I swear, it didn't mean anything." She took a deep breath. "That's what hurts most, that it didn't mean anything. You threw away trust for something meaningless." The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Ryan, who had been upstairs, heard raised voices and came halfway down the stairs but stopped, not wanting to intrude. He could hear every word. Mark sat down, his hands gripping his coffee mug like an anchor. "Lena, please, I'm sorry. I'll end it. I already have. It was a mistake, okay? I want to fix this." But Lena shook her head. "You can't fix something by pretending it didn't happen." He reached out, but she stepped back. "Don't," she said quietly. "Just don't." Ryan came down the rest of the stairs now, slowly. "Dad," he said carefully, "you need to give her space." Mark turned to him sharply. "You told her, didn't you?" Ryan didn't back down. "She deserved to know." "You were lying to her." Mark's tone rose. "You had no right. Neither did you." Ryan interrupted, his voice calm but firm. "You hurt her. And I'm not going to watch you pretend it's nothing. Lena stepped between them. Stop, both of you. This isn't about blame anymore. She turned to Mark again. I don't want to fight. I just need to understand, were you unhappy? Or were you just careless? Mark sighed heavily. Maybe both, he admitted. I didn't stop to think what I was risking until it was too late. Lena looked at him for a long moment, then said quietly, You risked the only person who still believed in you. That broke him more than shouting ever could. She walked past him, needing air. Outside, the world looked calm, the sun rising over the trees, the same street she had walked every morning for years. But everything inside her had shifted. Ryan followed her outside after a few minutes. You okay? He asked softly. She nodded faintly, though her voice shook when she said, No, but I will be. They sat on the porch steps. She wrapped her sweater around her shoulders as a breeze passed through. It's strange, she said after a pause. You spend years building something thinking it's solid. Then, one secret makes it all feel like sand. Ryan looked at her, sadness in his eyes. You didn't do anything wrong. You gave him everything. Lena smiled weakly. Sometimes giving everything isn't enough when the other person stops trying. They sat quietly for a while. Ryan wanted to comfort her, but he also respected her silence. Finally, she turned to him. Thank you, Ryan, for being honest. For caring. He shook his head. You've always treated me like family. You deserved to know the truth. That evening, Mark tried again to talk. He came into the living room where Lena was sitting, watching the fire flicker. Please, Lena, he said softly, don't let this end us. We can go to counseling. We can work through it. She looked up at him, tired but composed. Do you really want to fix us? Or do you just want to feel better about what you did? He didn't answer. That's what I thought, she said. He started to speak again, but she stopped him with a raised hand. Mark, I'm not angry anymore. I'm just done pretending. Her calmness scared him more than her tears ever could. So what now? He asked. I need time, she said. Maybe I'll stay with my sister for a while. Maybe I'll come back. But right now, I need to find myself again. He tried to argue, but the look in her eyes told him it was over, at least for now. He nodded slowly, defeated. All right, he whispered. I'll give you space. That night, Lena packed a small bag. Ryan helped her carry it to the car. The air was cool and still, and the sky was filled with faint stars. Before she got in, she turned to Ryan. You'll be okay here. He nodded. Yeah, don't worry about me. You do what's best for you, she smiled, eyes glistening. You've grown into a good man, Ryan. Your mother would be proud. Because of you, he said simply. She reached up and hugged him, a warm, genuine hug filled with gratitude, not sadness. Take care of yourself, she whispered. I will, he said. And you take care of your heart. She nodded, then got into the car. As she drove away, the reflection of the porch light faded in her rearview mirror. For the first time in years, she felt both lost and free. The next morning, Mark sat at the kitchen table alone. He stared at the empty chair across from him, realizing what he'd truly lost. Ryan walked in quietly, made coffee, and sat down. Is she okay? Mark asked softly. Ryan nodded. She will be. She's stronger than you think. Mark looked down. No. I just wish I'd realized that sooner. Ryan didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. Days turned into weeks. Lena stayed with her sister near the coast, spending her mornings walking along the beach, thinking, healing. Sometimes she would get texts from Mark, short apologies or updates, but she rarely replied. It wasn't out of bitterness. She just needed silence. Ryan visited her once before heading back to college. They walked along the shore, the wind brushing through their hair. I'm glad you left, he said. It's good for you. She smiled. It's scary too, but maybe sometimes we need to lose something to find ourselves again. He nodded. You'll be okay. I know, she said, her voice soft but steady. For the first time, I really believe that. When he hugged her goodbye, she felt proud of the boy who would become a man, and proud of herself for finally choosing peace over fear. Months later, Lena returned to her home in Maple Creek. The house felt different, quieter, emptier, but lighter somehow. Mark wasn't there. He had moved in with a friend temporarily, giving her space as promised. She walked through each room, touching familiar walls, memories flooding back. In the living room, she stopped by the fireplace where she and Ryan had once sat, talking about courage and truth. A small smile formed on her lips. She knew she couldn't rewrite the past. But she could start over, not for anyone else, but for herself. That night, she stood by the same window where she had once waited for Mark to come home. Now, she wasn't waiting for anyone. She looked out at the stars and whispered, "It's okay." And it was.